Howdy again everyone. One of the most enjoyably dramatic focal lengths on a full frame camera is 85mm. Such a lens with a bright maximum aperture can get you stunning images with a nicely compressed perspective and a beautifully out of focus background. It's certainly one of the easier focal lengths to use for portrait pictures. If you use an 85mm lens on an aps-c camera, then that field of view will be the full frame equivalent of about 128mm, a lot tighter again, but still very useful for portrait pictures. Camera lenses in this short telephoto range are a bit easier for manufacturers to design than wide-angle ones, and resultantly, some of the sharpest lenses in the world occupy this focal length, so let's see some of the sharpest I've ever tested. I've actually retested some older 85mm lenses on higher resolution cameras just for this video. You should bear in mind that every lens you see in this video is really excellent. No one in their right mind would be disappointed to own one of them. I looked at all my test results very carefully, taking into consideration the resolution, the contrast, and the colour fringing of each lens at their maximum apertures and stopped down to f2, and both in the middle of their images and in the image corners. These are camera lenses of any price and they are all full frame optics, but ultimately if there's an 85mm or so lens out there that I've tested and it does not appear in this video, then it just wasn't quite as sharp as these ones. Don't take it personally, for goodness sake. You'll also be able to find links to my full reviews of each of these lenses below in the description, as well as affiliate links if you want to buy one, which goes into supporting the work I do on this channel. Thank you kindly. And one final thing I'll say, these tests that I do are not the be-all and end-all. Although I wish I could say they were, I'm extremely careful with all my tests, but a little human error can sometimes creep in there, and lenses do sometimes suffer from a little sample variation, so take a balanced perspective on what you see. And if you're a bit of a fanboy for one particular brand of lens, then just try not to get too triggered. So, at number 7 comes a very new lens, the Canon RF 85mm f2 Macro IS STM. A few Nikon fanboys have already freaked out that I found this lens to be a little better than the new Nikon Z mount 85mm f1.8 lens, but that is what my test results honestly presented. Just a tiny bit more sharpness and contrast came out of the Canon option. This Canon lens has slow autofocus and an unimpressive maximum aperture, but it does have some neat bonus features like image stabilization and macro ability, but most of all, I was just really surprised by its fantastically sharp image quality, making it a flexible little option for Canon EOS R system users. Next, the Zeiss Batis 85mm f1.8, a lens I've only just got round to testing a short while ago because I wanted to see if it was good enough to be included in this video, which it was. This is the dictionary definition of a classy lens, really. Beautiful build quality, good functionality, including its own optical image stabilization system, and most of all, some extremely sharp optics with excellent contrast no matter what aperture you're shooting at. At a cost of over £1,000 or well over $1,200 US, it's not exactly cheap for an f1.8 lens, but you are certainly paying for quality here. Next, another Zeiss lens, this time the slightly more expensive Milvus 85mm f1.4. It's manual focus only, and it's for digital SLR cameras, and it comes in at about $1,800 US. It's nowhere near as good value as the previous Batis lens, which offers image stabilization and autofocus, but for the purposes of this list, I found it to be just marginally sharper, and of course it lets in more light than the Batis. And speaking of marginally sharper, at number 4 we have yet another Zeiss lens, the legendary Otus 85mm f1.4. The Zeiss Otus line of lenses were considered the sharpest in the known universe at the time of their release, and they certainly have some of the highest build quality. They really are incredibly accomplished instruments, although this thing's cost of $4,500 US for a manual focus lens is excessive to say the least. This Otus lens is sharper than the other two Zeiss offerings by the tiniest margin you could possibly imagine in the image corners. There's virtually no difference between them at all, if truth be told, but if you put a crazy price tag on an admittedly very nice lens like this, then there will always be a market of wealthy people ready to buy one. Okay, it's been a bit of a Zeiss fest so far, but brilliant though their lenses are, they have been overtaken by some of the sharpest new optics on the market today. So, at number 3, we have the Sony FE 85mm f1.4 GM. I was really blown away by the fantastic sharpness and contrast from this, one of Sony's best lenses ever. From corner to corner on a full frame camera or aps-c, tons of detail is being resolved by this powerful, bright aperture lens. It's incredibly expensive for sure, but this is the peak of Sony's professional lens lineup, worthy of the G Master title for sure, and it has useful controls for video work as well. I loved testing out this lens, it works so perfectly on any Sony camera. Okay, if truth be told, all of those lenses are pretty fantastic, so what could possibly beat them? Well, in joint first and second place, I actually have 3 lenses. The Sigma 85mm f1.4 DG-DN Art for mirrorless cameras, and DG-HSM Art version for digital SLRs, both lenses of which are both equally sharp, and which I'm putting together for this video, and the Canon RF 85mm f1.2 L. Now, let me explain. I have pored over the test chart pictures of my hard drive for a long time between these 3 lenses, desperate to find an overall winner, but they are just way too close to call. Even with their apertures wide open, they are razor sharp across their entire image, corner to corner, on my 42 and 45 megapixel cameras. In some areas, the Canon lens looked slightly less sharp than the Sigma lenses, but only in the tiniest way, and I had to bear in mind that I was testing the Canon lens on a slightly more demanding 45 megapixel camera. The Canon also had slightly less chromatic aberration, but honestly, without having much higher resolution cameras to test these on, any differences between all 3 of these lenses could be put down to human error in testing on my part or sample variation on the part of the manufacturer. But undoubtedly, all 3 of them are just something else, simply incredible performers. When it comes to value for money though, at half the price of the Canon lens, the Sigma lenses really are astonishing, even if their maximum aperture is very slightly darker. So there you have it. Here are a couple of honourable mentions for you, just to tie things up. The Samyang XP 85mm f1.2 was a lens I tested years ago, and at the time it was the sharpest I'd ever seen. I kind of fell in love with it really. However, that was when I was only testing lenses on 20 megapixel cameras, and while it remains an absolutely brilliant optic, its sharpness in my recent tests just about shied away from reaching the dizzying heights of these other 7. Likewise, the Nikon Z 85mm f1.8s, which I mentioned earlier, again a brilliantly sharp lens, but in my tests anyway, it was pipped to the post by that Canon lens. But remember everyone, as I said in my last such video about 50mm lenses, sharpness isn't everything. Each of these lenses is excellent, and they each have their own unique character. So what's your favourite 85mm lens you've ever handled? Let me know in the comment section below, and I'll see you next time. God bless.